without further ado, we are very, very, very excited to introduce you to this month's speaker, Oskar Kirk Hansen. Oskar is a queer multimedia artist and co-founder of the Greenwood Cafe, a safe and sober space for the LGBTQ+ community. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on the virtual microphone to the wonderful, the glamorous, the amazing Oskar Kirk Hansen.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me all right. Hello, hello, hello. My name's Oskar Kirk Hansen, as you can probably see from a picture from about 3 years ago when I was a lot skinnier, but that's all right. And I also do this, the picture you can see there. I'm known as Mystica Glamour, the surrealist, socialist, socialite. A little bit of context about me, first of all. I'm one of those international, multinational suitcase people. I'm half Danish on my father's side and half British on my mother's side. But I was born in Thailand and grew up in Southeast Asia as a kid. And then I grew up in Italy as a teenager, which is a great country to discover that you're, a little bit queer, perhaps. After studying in high school in Italy, I decided to study film. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be the gay David Lynch, essentially. And I did a film foundation course at the European Film College in Denmark. My dad was like, oh, go discover your European roots kind of thing. So I did that and realized that I learned a lot, but that filmmaking in the sense of like cinema filmmaking just wasn't quite for me. So for about a year and a half, I lived in Copenhagen trying to make sort of experimental videos, working as a dishwasher, like all good artists. I've worked in hospitality since I was about 15, 16. And after a while, I realized this wasn't exactly my place. Copenhagen just didn't quite work for me. So I decided to try the other side of my family and move to Edinburgh, Scotland. And yeah, so I moved here about 4 years ago, I think. Didn't really know anybody, but I found my dream flat on London Road, right around the corner from Edinburgh's main gay bar, CC Bloom's. I'd been interested in drag through shows like Drag Race and just in general seeing things online, but I never quite had the courage to do it, especially as I was a bearded, 6'3", sort of gangly, dyspraxic, autistic person. I was like, there's no way I could do this. But I started going to CC Bloom's and realized that there's a weekly drag show there, pre-COVID, of course. And that was where I really started to see different types of drag and different just aspects of the queer community. And that really inspired me to actually start doing something. First off, I sort of built up the courage to ask Alice Rabbit, the main hostess of the show, if I could make little videos for the rabbit hole. Just with my really low quality little camcorder, just sitting in the front row, really anxious and sort of filming them. Eventually I started wearing absolutely atrocious makeup, just black lines all over my face and a really ill-fitting charity shop dress. And I think Alice saw me and said, okay, here we go. How long till she starts, wanting to perform? Took me about a year, but I managed, and I performed for the first time at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2017, in fact. From there, I sort of kept performing a little bit, but before I really even had that courage to properly go out, I think one of the things that's quite relevant to what I want to talk about is the fact that I was so scared of leaving the house dressed up, just because of this idea of, someone's going to attack me or yell slurs at me or, all these different anxieties in my head. I think the first time I did makeup, which was literally just 2 black triangles to the top of my head, like that from my brows, I just had a 40-minute panic attack just because I thought someone's going to, attack me or whatever. But then I left the house and I did it anyway, and nothing really happened. And of course, people stared and were like, okay, sure. But nothing really happened. And I realized, oh, there's a power in this, that I can actually just do this. And I kept experimenting more and more. And eventually, if anything, the walk from my house to CC Bloom, just like a 10-minute walk, became part of my performance in a way, this way of walking down the street and being like, yes, I'm here. So people walking past me would say, of course they're going to look. And even if they pretend they don't, they're looking, because I'm, 7 foot tall with a huge purple wig on and glitter falling about everywhere. But it was like, okay, great. I'm just doing this. And some people really smiled and yelled support. Some people, of course, would yell slurs at me, the one that rhymes with maggot and things like that. But then it sort of changed things around in my perspective, because I was like, oh, okay, if you're going to yell a slur at me, it's like, well, do you think? Like I'm dressed up like this and I've turned this into my profession almost, or at least my artistic expression. So who are you? You know, I'm going to do this for a living. Well, just about. You know, drag shows are notoriously underpaid, but still, I made it work. And yeah, it was really this moment where it sort of clicked in my head, like, oh, okay, everything I want is on the other side of my fear. So I might as well just do it and sort of break through that. Exactly 1 year later, after performing for the first time, I had my first like very own fringe show, which I called Glamour, the Queer Cabaret, a little like 10-day just free fringe cabaret show where I tried to get some of the freaks and the weirdos from the fringe circuit and locally. That was really the first place where I like spoke on the mic and sort of had to entertain people. And it really sort of switched in my head that this was no longer about just me and like my art or whatever. This was about a whole community, a crowd, and all of that. And on the last night of the fringe show, the bar management came up to me and said, hey, we've never really had a drag show here because we're a little bit, I don't know, different, but you're, you know, different. And we really like your style. And you've obviously brought in a lot of people. Would you like to do this, you know, throughout the year? Do you want to do it maybe monthly? To which I said, I'll do it weekly. And so I think a month later, from October onwards, October 2018, I hosted Glamour as a weekly show every single Monday night at the Street nightclub. And that was really, is like the most important thing I've ever done, because it really sort of meant a lot to me. Because again, it was like an extra level of, this isn't just about me, this is about the community, the people in the room, the people behind the bar as well. I had to think about all these different things and sort of manage them. And it really taught me to be, I wouldn't say a people pleaser, but I had to be kind and giving to everyone and also have boundaries. I also had, very much had to learn boundaries with people, especially in this environment of alcohol and sort of people being out of control and all that, including myself, dare I say. A lot of drag is about drinking and sort of having a good time and making people go to the bar, you know, on a pure sort of basic business level. Then I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but a little very underground, cool, hip thing called COVID-19 happened and kind of changed everyone's plans around a little bit. And of course, personally, I take full responsibility for COVID because this was going to be the year I did like Brighton Fringe, Edinburgh Fringe, other festivals, Switzerland, Berlin, all these different things. So I think the universe just said, no, sweetie, we're going to calm you down a little bit, stay humble a little bit. And it was really quite insane to see how much the drag community across the world adapted to online shows and live streams and pre-recorded performances and things like that. But after a while of doing that and sort of burning myself out on it, because it's twice the amount of work to edit together a 40-minute show for about a quarter of the money, essentially, I started to focus more on meditation, on tarot card readings, because that was the thing I started doing as I started doing drag as well, was reading tarot cards, just as a way to sort of externalize my thoughts in a way and sort of recognize what I was going through and what the people around me were going through. And I also started exploring sobriety because I did realize that a lot of my job was about drinking. And so I needed to take a little step back from that, especially when I wasn't allowed into nightclub spaces, you know. I was just sitting in this literal chair, turning around here to do my makeup in my little dresser table, and then turning around here to film a video. And it just wasn't the same. So I started exploring sobriety, at least sort of part-time. And as I started doing that, the universe said, okay, great, here's another little gift for you. And I saw a Facebook post from a little cafe and shop in, I think, Bruntsfield area. It's sort of on the boundary of different spaces. That said it was looking for new management come September. And I shared it on Facebook, mostly as a joke, because I don't know anything about running a business, saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a little sober queer cafe, which is sort of an idea that's been sort of bubbling around. And I've heard people talk about it. And I've seen some people do it in America and the States and whatever. But I thought, oh, wouldn't that be nice? And my friend Zach, who you see in the picture there, wrote to me and said, hey, I saw that post too. I was about to write to them. Now, Zach has much more of a practical sort of business, mathematical mind. I think at one point he said, oh, I just love doing spreadsheets, to which I said, okay, honey, you go ahead, you take that, because I just cannot. But we put our minds together, and he used to run the costume shop on Victoria Street. So he has more experience managing a business and doing all this stuff. And so we put our brains together and we got it, basically. So we had about 2 months to get everything together, and we realized, obviously, we're dead broke. So I suggested we do a little GoFundMe, like a crowdfunding campaign. We weren't super optimistic about it, of course, because we know everyone's broke, everyone's struggling right now. But we made our original goal of about, I think, £3,000 within 3 hours, which was absolutely insane to us. We were like, what? So we raised it again, and we made it within, I think, 48 hours. And then we eventually raised it to 10K because we realized that's what we actually needed, essentially, to open a new business. And we just about reached it, which was good enough. We had enough to sort of really do this. And yeah, after 3 manic days of painting from 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day for 3 days, we opened on the 4th of September. And our real main goal with all of this was to make it a safe, sober space for the queer community, essentially. We sort of felt that, like, both of us, you can look at us there, we both worked at the street nightclub mostly. Zach as a DJ, and myself, obviously, as a drag queen and a cabaret host and all these things. So we sort of came from this world of this queer world of alcohol and partying and sort of escapism in a way, and then suddenly going into this world of vegan food and, you know, eco-friendly groceries and all this sort of like totally different world. But I think for us, especially the way I sort of thought about it, and the way, well, here's the main thing, is that with the GoFundMe campaign especially, we started getting so many messages from people. And beyond the money, what meant the most to me was seeing these people say things like, this is exactly what I needed. I really want to come into a queer space where I feel safe and included and I can just be myself, but that isn't centered around alcohol or doesn't have thumping loud music. Of course, because this is the thing, a lot of LGBT spaces are just that. I remember being at the street once, and a mother and her like 16-year-old daughter came in, and they just wanted a coffee, but they weren't allowed to because it's an 18+ space, essentially. So we wanted to make it a space for like younger queer people to, you know, have some representation and to be able to come in and for it to be explicitly queer without having to be fully, you know, unicorns and rainbows and, you know, sort of all that, but featuring prints and art pieces and zines and things like that by local up and coming queer artists. For me, that was a really important thing of having local artists, because I know how it feels to be broke, queer, trying to sort of make a point about your identity and just not having that representation. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can get a little like tokenistic exhibition perhaps, but to actually sell your work and make money off your work, I know how it feels to be broke, and I know how it feels to make some money off your art. So that was really important to me. And I had that network of people mostly through like the drag shows, and who would come in or did illustrations of me in drag and things like that. So I just reached out to as many people as I could. And we also do monthly exhibitions of local like queer artists, essentially. And that would, yeah, we just have this tiny little basement space with a ceiling that's about this low, which is great for me at 6'3". I said, let me curate these exhibitions, and then realize what the space actually was. But that's fine, I don't mind. I just sit on a little office chair and sort of scoot around. It's really funny. Yeah, and one thing as well I wanted to point out, that with all the positive messages that came with like the GoFundMe, and this picture here of me and Zach outside the old Greenwood was for, I think it was the Daily Record or something like that. It's kind of a bit tabloidy. And I know you're not supposed to read the comments on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. I know you're not supposed to. I did though, just to sort of see what was happening. And the amount of like negative comments and the amount of people saying, oh, imagine if it was like, if you called it a straight cafe, it would be an outrage. Or, you know, like, oh, but there's no homophobia in Scotland. What are you talking about? Just, you know, it's illegal to be homophobic, blah, blah, blah. You can get gay married. And it's like, sweetie, you're proving the point here. You're proving the point. I think Scotland's doing amazing work at being more open and free and sort of pushing, you know, against discrimination, but there's still a long way to go. Even I think, is it next year, they're introducing like LGBT plus education in schools. I think that's amazing. I think it's 20 years late. you know, if not 40 years late. Like we need to keep pushing for this stuff. And just because it's, you know, illegal to discriminate against queer people, for example, that doesn't mean that we're just like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna assimilate now. Like I'm just gonna blend into the background. Like, no, if anything, we have to keep pushing. And I think that was our whole point with this cafe, was to make it more, just to have an option of a different queer space. Obviously, you can come in if you're not on the queer rainbow spectrum, you know, obviously, that's not our point. You know, it's like when people say like, oh, so are straight people allowed in? I'm like, I actually really want to do a sketch, like a video sketch about this and say, oh, imagine, you know, like if it was a hetero-free zone, just because that's a joke and that's a sort of potential sort of idea. That's not a joke for queer people when we have like full-on LGBT-free spaces in Poland, when we have countries like Russia and all these other, you know, countries across the world. When we're talking as the UK, the country that brought so many homophobic laws and rules to other countries through imperialism, you know, like we're not allowed to just sort of blend into the background and say, oh, it's okay, you know, gay issues are sorted now, whatever. No, we can't do that. So that was my little rant, but I'll get more to the point now. But essentially, at the end of the day, with the Greenwood as well, we really just want to have a space for people to come in, especially after the, I mean, globally traumatic year that this has been, to come in and see their friends again, to have some community again, and to feel like there is a space for them and for other people who might not be, you know, very privileged. It's so important to us. And, you know, what I was saying earlier about having like younger people, like younger queer people getting represented, but actually what's been more meaningful to me, once we actually are doing it and we're open now, is seeing older queer people come in and say, oh yes, you know, things like, I used to go to the bars, but I can't now, it's just too loud and too noisy, whatever. Or I can't drink anymore because I have a problem. And just hearing them, you know, tell stories of like, oh, well, I couldn't, what do you say? Like my mother never accepted me. She kicked me out of the house. On opening day, I met this absolute icon, this transgender woman who popped along on a huge like Iron Man wheelchair. I was sitting outside and she just sort of whizzed along and she said, hi, love, hi, you all right? And just started talking at me and I loved her. And she told this story of how she was in the military, like in Afghanistan, flying a helicopter, saving some like kids from a camp somewhere. And the helicopter crashed or like got shot down. And she said, and that's the day they discovered I was transgender because they took off my like military outfit and I was wearing panties. And I was like, what? I just screamed out loud. And it's just these little stories that have sort of accumulated in the Greenwood now that really make me realize, oh, this is necessary at this point. And there are days, I think like drag has sort of taught me or like prepared me to do this kind of job. Because as I said, it's taught me to talk to anyone if I need to, and to sort of put on a smiley face if I need to. It is a bit trickier, of course, when I'm in drag, I'm all dressed up and I can sort of feel this character come on and I'm just like, woo, let's go. And then I can take it off at the end and just be myself. There's a few less boundaries, I'd say, as Oskar, but it is exhausting. And it is, especially I'm a person with chronic pain due to hypermobility, I'm on the autistic spectrum, all these different little things. So it does get overwhelming sometimes. But just as I'm about to give up hope, someone will walk in and say, oh, by the way, thank you so much for doing this. I really needed to see, you know, queer art and the queer space and all these different things. I'm like, oh, right. Okay. This isn't just about me. Again, this is about a whole community here, essentially. So that's what really sort of pushes me forwards every day. And that's why I call this talk Hope is a Verb, because it's not a sort of one singular thing that you have within you. It's a messy process of like ups and downs and chaos, essentially. And, you know, in all honesty, this has been a very tough week. This has been a very tough month, let alone 2 months, let alone year. But I'm here, and things like this talk and community and seeing what it actually means to people is what makes it all worth it. So I'd like to thank you all for being here, both Creative Mornings and everyone watching. And I really hope to see you at the Greenwood at some point. We're open every single day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we've got all sorts of eco-friendly groceries, baked goods, hot vegan food. Of course, as I said, all the prints by local artists. We're trying to get more and more going. And also, if you're feeling alone on Christmas Eve and you don't have anywhere to go due to restrictions or whatever it is, we're hosting a Christmas sort of lunch on Christmas Eve with all vegan food, like a sort of delicious vegan stew with like chestnuts and rosemary, I think, and like bread and cakes and all that. So if you want to come in, you can email us at greenwoodcafe@gmail.com and book a spot if you feel like. Because we really know that, especially for the queer community, times like Christmas can be extra isolating, and let alone this year when it's like more and more and more isolated. So if you're alone, please feel free to come in to the Greenwood. And you can follow us on Instagram at Greenwood Cafe. You probably saw it on the Instagram page for Creative Mornings. And yes, if you'd like to support me as an artist, one way or the other, you can support me for literally just £2 a month at patreon.com/missglamour. That's MYS Glamour, patreon.com/missglamour. Thank you all so much for listening to me ramble about queer identities. And I would just like to end things off with one little quote that I have from my favorite book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, if that's all right. And I'd just like you all to sort of get comfortable, take a couple of deep breaths, and just let's get into it. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burnt in the potter's oven? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall. That's The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope to see you soon.
Oskar, thank you so much for your amazing talk. I feel like I just loved it. Now, I know that Rebecca has got some questions from everybody that has just watched your talk. So Rebecca, if you unmute yourself, let's get things kick-started. What does everybody want to know from Oskar?
Lovely. Thank you, Kat. And thank you, Oskar, for such a beautiful and inspiring talk.
Thank you.
Loads of love for you in the comments. So I guess the first question that we'll start with is, what's the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself and your community through this experience?
Woo.
Big question to start.
Yeah. Through the whole experience of Greenwood, that I have to take better care of my body. in total honesty. I think I sort of briefly mentioned that I had chronic pain. And dare I say, walking to and from a cafe and sort of walking about a cafe all day. It's hard to imagine, but it doesn't help. It doesn't really help. That sounds silly, but it really is a sort of thing that I've started to think about more, because it was affecting me when I was doing drag as well. But just having, it just sort of reminds me of like having how a disabled, sorry, let me start again. I feel like some people don't realize how much having a disabled body really affects everything. Because it's not just like, oh, my back hurts today, let me just crack it out. It's like, no, this is there pretty much for life. And there's things that I'm doing to sort of improve it and stuff, but it's constantly there. And sort of in any action that I do, it's there. There's this sort of saying that people with chronic pain, if they don't say that they're in pain, they're in a lot of pain. If they tell you they're in pain, like it's a whole other level. So I think I've learned more and more to respect my body and to sort of know its limits and to sort of be like, okay, I need to like shift this around. I need to walk now. I need to sit down now, instead of doing one or the other. Doesn't help as well, of course, that when I was doing drag, I was very much, either just sitting about on my computer or fully, downing an energy drink and doing like, not cartwheels exactly, but sort of, yeah, just ridiculous choreography, which I can't do normally until I've had 5 drinks. And then suddenly I'm like, woo, just like bouncing off the walls. So yeah, it's been a good sort of phase of learning to respect my body. Yeah, that's probably not what you're expecting, but yeah.
No, that's really interesting. It's, I guess, looking after yourself so that you can support other people. That whole "you can't pour from an empty cup."
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. I love that saying. Yeah, and that's the other thing I've learned very much, because on a more sort of mental level, the burnout has been quite real, to be honest, with this job even, because it's so much more than just. In a way, it's good because I love my creativity, of course, but sometimes with a creative project or a drag look, whatever it is, you're up at 3 a.m. like, oh God, what am I going to do for this number? And then I should wear this, then I should do that, and then I should. With this, it is very much like, right, I'm done for the day. There's nothing I can do till tomorrow. Let's just pop out. But then, of course, as an owner, I'm always thinking about like, okay, then what are we going to do for this, and how are we going to, get more sales in, and how are we going to, my brain's sort of all over the place still. So yeah, just sort of learning how to deal with burnout a little bit more as well, and sort of mentally how I can actually give to people more, and weirdly, sort of seeing how much I can be like fully just exhausted at home, like wake up in the morning just like, there's no way. Like my body, my mind is just like it's like short circuiting. And then the second I get into the cafe, it's like just perfect. But yeah, I make it work.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like it's a very energizing space to be in, which is cool.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the free access to coffee, so I'm just like.
Also that. We've got a question here. So you're chatting about your act there and how it's changed because you're looking after your body and thinking about that. But we've got a question here about how long did it take you to find that drag identity, and does it change? How is it changing?
Yeah, good one. It's a funny one because I feel like I was saying this the other day, like because it's funny because with drag, yes, there's the performance, like get up on stage and lip sync for 5 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever. But a lot of the job is, I like to think of drag as the art form of identity, because the whole thing is sort of being, if not a character, being a person. You like, especially as a show host, 80% of the job is talking to the people in the crowd, making sure everyone's having a laugh, talking on the mic, and sort of talking about jokes and all that, but also about mental health and politics and things like that. And it's I think the character came as I did it. I didn't sort of exactly sit down and be like, okay, this is the character. I had a sort of rough idea, but then it sort of took its own life. And I think it just sort of changes you once you're in all that makeup and in the wig and whatever. It's still you, but it is just a much more outgoing side to yourself. And especially when I look like how I look in drag, I can't exactly be there like, hi guys, how's it going? Yeah, the show was really good today. No, it's like, woo, how's it going, guys? Blah, 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 blah. Just literally bouncing off the walls, screaming at people, which is a coping mechanism as well, because I am talking to maybe 100 people a night, so it is a lot of humor first, and just be like, oh my god, can you believe it? Whatever. It's instead of, I can't have a deep, meaningful chat with everyone in a way. But I'd rather make people laugh, and then if you know me, you know me, like if we can get to know each other and whatever. And I think most importantly, the drag character really helped me come out of my own shell as Oskar, and give me a lot more confidence, especially considering when I moved to Edinburgh, I was like deeply agoraphobic, had all sorts of body issues, social anxiety, all sorts of little things. And so drag really sort of pulled me out of that mostly. And yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Thank you. Alex asks, Alex says she'd love to know how the Scottish drag scene compares to other places that you've been in and lived in.
I'd say the Scottish drag scene is very underpaid. In all honesty, I feel like there's not as much of an infrastructure of payment kind of thing. It's very much there's a lot of, not all the time, of course, and I was quite lucky, but there's a lot of drag queens sort of doing it for the first couple of times, and they just go to a bar and say, hey, can I do a show? And they're like, okay, sure. Like a lot of the shows pay just in tips. So we have like a tip bucket and people donate. I think the first time I performed, I got like £7 because it was the night like after the Fringe was over. So they were like, no one wants to go to a show. There were like 10 people there and they were our friends. It's like, sure. So we got £7. The week after that, I got 70 in tips. So it's like, okay, it's just very like everything or nothing. Whereas some places I go to, like I performed in Switzerland 3 years in a row. And they're obviously, I mean, it's Switzerland, so it's like, they're fine. You know, the drag queens are like, oh yeah, I just bought this Gucci bag and this Versace jacket. It's like, well, I stapled 2 pieces of velvet together and got like a tulle loofah on my head, and that's my drag. You know, it's like, and they're like, oh, Gucci, Chanel. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. It's a charity show. So yeah, I would like to see sort of things shift a little bit, but at the same time, it's made us really punk. I feel like Scottish drag, especially Edinburgh drag in a way, well, all of it, is just really punk and sort of will make it work anyway, and really good at sort of turning nothing into something amazing.
Mm. Is there anywhere that you haven't performed yet that you're kind of dying to go to once all this is over?
I've done it all. No, I'm kidding. The dream was Berlin, and I went there last summer, which is great. Wish I had more time. I literally just went for like a night to like do this gig on a Tuesday night. Spent way too much money on it as well, but like, hey. I would love eventually to go to New York to perform, because I feel like New York drag was very like my early inspiration, sort of club kiddie, freaky, not all about sort of female impersonation in a way, which just isn't my thing personally. I can, you know, Mystica's a sort of female character, but it's not about like, oh, gorgeous. So I really like, yeah, I'd like something about New York if I was getting paid enough for it. New York's the kind of city, like London, New York, Paris. I'd go there if I was rich, you know. So I'd go there if I was like flown out and it was a good gig. But yeah, make it work.
Nice. Molly asks, Molly says, it's interesting that you saw drag online and on television for a while before choosing to dabble in it yourself. In the past, drag wouldn't have been so much of a public feature. Do you still think you would have gotten into it back then if you were working in it?
Good one. I think I would have. I think I probably would have found it one way or the other, because it is such an art form in the queer community kind of thing. So I think the more I just sort of looked out for like queer communities and people, I would have found it regardless. Of course, shows like RuPaul's Drag Race do help in sort of, up to a point, pushing a sort of, you know, just letting more people see it kind of thing. I do think a show like Drag Race is often a very limited perspective on what drag is, especially with it just being mostly like men or, you know, people who are assigned male at birth. I'd love to see drag kings represented, for example. There's just so much more drag out there. And I understand why they do it, but it's just like, okay, what else? You know, there's so much more out there. And I think I would have found it one way or the other. I remember when I was in Copenhagen, it was like Copenhagen Pride, and there was a big drag show. And that was, I think that was the first time as well that I saw a bearded queen, who I love her, Jaxie. And she was a little bit different and kooky. And I was like, oh, okay, right. Okay, it's sort of interesting. And then still thought about it. And then, yeah, moved to Edinburgh and saw even more like crazy, wacky drag. I was like, okay, let's do it. Why not?
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like drawing that inspiration from other people you've seen in other places. And I like what you said earlier about Edinburgh scene being a bit more punk and like, yeah, we'll just put it together. Let's just do it.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say especially Edinburgh drag, we're performers, you know. We're not all, I mean, some of them really absolutely are. We're not always the most like polished, but because we're in tiny nightclubs as well, you know, like we don't have the room to be in like a huge, magnificent, like crazy gown or whatever. It's like, no, you gotta, you know, like in the smoking area, which is also the, you know, like the drain, which is also like the street behind the Playhouse Theatre. And you're just like, you know, it's great. I miss that smoking area. God, I'm trying to quit smoking, but I do miss the smoking area outside CC Bloom's and just all the little like straight girls and their twink friends going, oh my God. I miss that.
So Rebecca, I think we've got time for like one or two more questions.
One or two more, lovely.
Do we have anything aimed around the shop?
Yeah. Drag is dead.
No, I'm like, I want to hear more about this, but I desperately want to go to a drag show at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning now. So.
Yeah. That'd be £500 to get me in drag at 6 a.m. But yeah.
Let me just have a wee look.
I might just be a little bit cheeky and jump in with my question.
Oh, yeah, go for it. I'll have a look at the chat.
Great. So obviously in your cafe, you said that you showcase work of local artists. How does someone get involved in that if they, if they're seeing this talk and they're interested and they want to showcase their work in your shop? How do they do that? What's the process?
You can write us an email at greenwoodcafe with a K, because I'm Scandinavian, at gmail.com, or just DM me on the Instagram page. Ideally, send some pictures of your work so I get an idea of like what it is that you do or what you want to do, kind of thing. And yeah, right now we currently have quite a lot of artists, and we only have like one shelf, kind of thing. So I think I've taken on a few new artists for December, but I don't have too much room. But it's always good to just send me a message, and then I can have sort of resources then be like, oh, someone dropped out, you can come in and sell your art. Because yeah, obviously we want to try and sort of keep some rotation going and have new artists coming in, because of course there's always new artists. So yeah, you can just message us by email or on the Instagram page or on Facebook.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Rebecca, was there any more burning questions that you want to ask, or are we okay to move on? What do you think?
I think the question that got the most excited response, Oskar, was, would you ever consider writing a book about your experience and the people that you've met on your journey?
I was thinking this yesterday, just because my crazy, stupid life, like just ridiculous. Sometimes I just sit back and go, what? Okay. Like born in Thailand, grew up in it. What? Okay. It's still sort of surreal to me. I feel like I've had 20 different lives. Let alone the fact that, I mean, if you told me a year ago that I would be managing a cafe, like, I would just laugh in your face and be like, no, what are you talking about? What? There's no way. Like, why would I want to do that? It's like a global pandemic. Yeah, I think I've lived too many stupid, weird lives, and I definitely do want to put them into a book, because the stories would be real. Oh God. Oh, I did one. We'll tell that story another time, of how I permanently scarred my forehead during a drag show.
My days.
Yeah, that was a great one. It really summarized the whole like turning pain into power thing.
Yeah, what a wonderful segue. So, I mean, you have a virtual chat room of people that would sign up for that book straight away. So thank you so much for your time this morning, Oskar, and for sharing your story. You've definitely entertained us this morning, so thank you so much.
Thank you, I'm really glad. And yeah, if you want me to write a book, remember to go to patreon.com/MYSGlamour if you like it. Thank you. Just saying.
Great plugging. Very
yeah. If there's one thing I've learned during the pandemic, is to not be ashamed of asking for money, because boy, do we not have it as queer artists. So.
Understood.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to leave. Take care.